Hey everyone, welcome to the Eat to Win show where sports nutrition meets peak performance. Get ready for expert insights, real stories, and tips to help you win with every meal. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Eat to Win podcast show. I'm your host, Ronnie Harper, and we're here to talk about all things related to sports nutrition and how we can help athletes win. Today we're here honored to have Kaitlyn Pscodna. Does that get that right, Kaitlyn? Yes, expert in field of sports nutrition and mental health, which I'm excited to dive into. Kaitlyn is passionate about promoting intuitive eating, weight-inclusive approaches to sports nutrition, helping athletes navigate red S eating disorders and all things such as that. Hey, we're going to do a deep dive into these topics. Let's get started. Kaitlyn, welcome to the Eat to Win podcast show.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, good to have you here. Let's start off with your story. Like, how did you combine this interest in nutrition and mental health? And I think it's a perfect fit. I think it's underrated in that all dietitians should have this mindset and focus because it truly is a mental game when it comes to your eating. So tell us that story.
Yeah, totally. So I would start by saying that when I was born, my dad was a Division III head football coach. And so sport was really embedded in my life growing up all throughout my childhood. He was either a head football coach or an athletic director. And so I was constantly around practices and games. And my mom never really misses any game that he had. And so just being in that environment, I saw firsthand how critical and how important it was for things like sports nutrition, but also the way that mental health really impacted performance. It wasn't until college when I had an eating disorder myself that I really got into nutrition at all. And originally, I went into nutrition from more of the holistic, functional med lens. I was really into, how could we optimize our health through various different nutrients and all of that. However, I then realized, I think there's something like a sports dietitian. And so I decided, geez, maybe I'll go into sports nutrition. And it's interesting because one of my advisors actually at the time was like, oh no, you'll never get a job in sports nutrition. So you should probably, change your outlook. And as I was going through college, I'm like, I think I'm actually okay. I think I could actually do something like this. I was highly involved with athletics at Michigan State, both with sports nutrition, but also on the administrative side. And so I'm like, kind of scrapping that thought, and this is what I'm going to do. In terms of the mental health aspect of it, I think, for anyone listening, it's no surprise that yes, eating disorders are, highly prevalent in sport. And so I'm like, oh, geez, how could I do some of that, prevention or treatment work in sports while also bringing in some of my eating disorder background and some of my eating disorder expertise from my own personal experience. And so I actually did my dietetic internship then in eating disorders and got one of my first jobs in a higher level of care where obviously mental health is huge. And so just being able to combine those two things, I knew that I wanted to take my counseling skills to the next level, but I also knew that in order for me to really be a strong sports dietitian or a strong eating disorder clinician, I would need to understand mental health and how that is impacting things. And so, now with the NIL and everything that we're seeing in collegiate sports, I think mental health is only going to be more and more important. And it's only going to kind of shift the sports nutrition lens as well. And so these two things tying together with one another, I think is just so critical moving forward.
Yeah, I love it. I love hearing people's story about their journey, about how they put the pieces together. I could tell my own journey. It took me 8 years to find my path of putting the pieces together. But I love hearing your story there. So let's dive into intuitive eating. Before I ask you some questions there, define intuitive eating for us.
So I think intuitive eating, as I would maybe define it, is really allowing the individual to kind of reclaim or develop that trust with their own body so that they can make food choices that really align with both the satiation side of food of I need to get my nutrient needs met, but also the satisfaction side of food with like the getting our psychological needs met. And so really just allowing our body to kind of be in the driver's seat versus listening to all of these different messages that are coming at us all at once.
There's different messages that are coming at us all at once. Man, I thought it would slow down, but it is picking up because I guess you can monetize a diet, put a name on it, classify it, package it, sell it, and then it's the best thing since sliced bread, and then people buy into it, and then all of a sudden it gets to be to where food is. So talk to us about intuitive eating in athletes and how this helps them have a healthier relationship with food. How does this connect with athletes?
Yeah, I think that oftentimes people think that intuitive eating can't work with athletes, and that's because, maybe we have certain performance goals, or maybe we have certain body composition goals, and people think that intuitive eating really means this free-for-all around food, and that, a free-for-all around food means, oh, I'm inevitably going to gain weight, and I'm not going to be able to perform the way that I want to. However, I think athletes can instead use the intuitive eating principles to still be in that driver's seat while also recognizing there are certain things that I'm going to have to do as an athlete in order to structure my meals for performance. And so what I mean by that is, I think it's important for an athlete to have, let's say, 3 meals, 2 to 3 snacks a day. However, how can we incorporate choice within that, which would be taking some of that intuitive eating and then allowing that to drive some of our decisions based on what we're going to have for lunch, or when we're going to have a snack, or if we're going to have dessert or not. And so when I'm kind of teaching that to athletes, I really like to tell them we can take a flexible structure, so we can have that baseline structure, but then I want a baked potato instead of fries today, or vice versa.
Yeah. So when you start working with an athlete and you start having this kind of discussion about intuitive eating, do you find that they relax more? They expecting you to deliver a package, right? And you follow this rigid standard. When you kind of relax that, do you find they relax as well?
I do, but I also think that I'm pushed up kind of against this idea or those messages that they're still hearing from outside sources of your body needs to look this certain way, you need to eat this certain way. I mean, oftentimes it's dating way back, right? Into, when they're 4 or 5 years old, they're hearing messages that, maybe their family has ate this specific way, or maybe their coach drilled something in them all throughout high school or something like that. And so it's like, I almost feel like there is a little bit of skepticism even of like, oh, geez, I don't really know what you're talking about right now, because my whole life I've heard this different story that I need a lot of regimented, I need to eat very regimented.
So I love your background and emphasis on mental health. And so let's just, before I break, let's dive into how this mindset of an athlete's relationship with food, how quickly, or what are common paths that lead to eating disorders? What are the slippery slopes? What's the path that you see the most common?
Yeah, I don't think we can really narrow down, this causes eating disorders. It's just so multifactorial. However, let's say, an athlete is in more of that aesthetic-based sport. I have a lot of experience working with more aesthetic-based sports. And so, these perceptions of what that athlete is supposed to look like, and you pair that with all of the different messaging that they're taking in about the diets and this and that, which then often, makes them think, oh, maybe I should restrict my carbohydrate intake, or maybe I should cut out this particular food group, or, I'm only losing weight so that I can get faster, those types of things. Those are some of the slippery slopes that I see a lot of the athletes that I have experience working with kind of going down. But I guess what I would say is, both those aesthetic based and those weight based or weight class sports, we are going to see that just being a factor in itself of, okay, here's a risk factor. But I also want to just mention that there are sports, I have a lot of experience, with football or even working in football. And I think that's actually pushed to the side because it isn't a weight-based sport and it isn't an aesthetic-based sport. So people think, oh, it doesn't impact football players, but then you kind of hear some of the chatter that is going on within, a football team. And it's like, ooh, this is really problematic. And nobody is taking this seriously because it doesn't fit into those defined categories.
The explosion of sports dietetics, sports nutrition, specific at the collegiate level, has really zoned in on emphasizing food and its relationship to sports performance, right? So there's a lot more eyes in the profession on those layers of athletes to uncover the potential warning signs that take place. So, well, I told you before we started this that we would come have you back on in early next year, and we'll do a deep dive on this, but I've got so many other questions, but I got some other stuff I want to get to before we end today. So stay with us as we take a short break to thank our sponsors. You're listening to the Eat to Win. Liquid Fuel is a new sports and hydration product formulated by a sports dietitian to give athletes the edge to train and compete longer. It contains a low glycemic carbohydrate, platinose, designed to keep blood sugar levels more stable to provide energy for 3 to 4 hours without the blood sugar crash seen in other leading sports nutrition drinks. Its unique 4-part electrolyte formula includes 50% of your daily magnesium need to optimize muscle function. Liquid Fuel is naturally sweetened along with no artificial ingredients or colors. Currently being used by high school, collegiate, and professional teams, Liquid Fuel allows you to live the life with confidence knowing you're properly fueling your body. Visit drinkliquidfuel.com and use the code MSD10 in order to get 10% off of your order. Welcome back to the Eat to Win podcast, where we're talking with Kaitlyn Pscodna. Yes, I'll get that by the time this is over with, about intuitive eating. And we haven't even got to Red S or weight inclusive sports a little bit, but we're going to jump back in. So let's continue down this roll and let's talk about what Red S is and how this plays into this whole intuitive eating and eating disorder kind of framework.
Yeah. So, I guess I'm not even going to go textbook what is Red S. I'm really going to say it how maybe I interpret it, which is this energy imbalance within our body. And when I'm explaining it to someone like an athlete, I really like to share this idea because athletes commonly think like, I'm not training today. I don't need any energy, or I don't need to, eat much at all. And so when I'm thinking about, REDS, this is really when we're not eating enough, basically to support our daily functioning. And so all of the energy that we are giving our body is being used to, keep us alive, but also support, our training and things like that. And so when we're again having that mismatch or that imbalance, all of the rest of the things that are keeping us alive are kind of pushed to the side. And it's really leading to that large energy imbalance that a lot of people don't really recognize and or understand.
Yeah. Yeah, I found in my own experience dealing with adolescent athletes, like I struggled with the growth and development of young people. And then I watched the environment that they were placed in, which is high school, and then look at like the rules that are set around them, the struggles that they have, the food insecurity issues. And then pretty soon it's like, wow, this is like real thing. And nobody really even knows it. It has a name, but yeah, people struggle to understand the true significance of a developing athlete who is burning energy like nobody's business, right? And so, yeah, that was just my own take about that. So
Yeah.
Let's get back to mental health. I'm really interested in the direction that you see mental health playing. You touched on this earlier in how you saw the two bridging together. Do you see mental health and the focus in mental health becoming more prevalent in sports dietetics or not? Talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I would certainly say that just with the changing landscape of sports that is on our very near horizon, I do see mental health challenges continuing to skyrocket. And as a result, that is going to impact eating. I have, a lot of athletes with things like depression and anxiety, which then, impact their ability to meet their everyday needs. And so how do we support them with the mental health piece? And again, that's all going to change, because are we going to actually see, let's say, athletic departments invest in mental health providers, or is it going to be the expectation of the athlete to seek some of those services themselves now that they're going to be paid? So I think it's going to be really interesting to as it unfolds. However, again, back to kind of your question, I think that it's only going to make things worse, which is really unfortunate. And I don't think that actually a lot of the people that are making some of these higher level decisions are really factoring in or taking into account.
So tie all this together. So we have talked briefly about intuitive eating. We defined it. We defined Red S. We talked about mental health and eating disorders. And let's go back and sort of tie all of this together and attach intuitive eating as the predominant solution to keep this balance. How does that become like what you think is the focus that a sports dietitian should be thinking about when trying to ward against the things that athletes struggle with?
Absolutely. So, I think anytime we are taking a body composition approach or taking any sort of, changing of macronutrients or anything like that, we are taking a risk. And with stakes already being so high as it relates to things like mental health, I think, like we talked about earlier, what is the slippery slope? And, the intuitive eating approach really is giving the individual power back. And it's putting all of that stress, obsession, anxiety aside as it relates to food, and just encouraging the individual to develop that positive relationship with food and develop that positive relationship with body and have a lot of choice in it. And so, what do I see, or how do I see intuitive eating really factoring in is it's reducing some of that stress that athletes have of the next thing they have to perfect or the next thing they have to control. And it's just allowing them to, enjoy food for what it is, while I would argue still meeting their performance goals should they, work with a professional, let's say like myself, who understands the connection between the two and is able to help guide them to make really strong choices for both their health, but also performance too.
I see. So you're working with an athlete. How quick in the conversation can you pick up that they are or are not in the intuitive eating mindset?
Yeah, I would say actually it's few and far between individuals being in the intuitive eating mindset when I first meet them, that's for sure. So pretty quickly, I would say that a lot of my initial intake questions are gauged to really figure that out rather fast. But yeah, I would say, geez, maybe less than 10% are going to be in that intuitive eating mindset prior to coming and seeing me. And perhaps actually the reason they are coming to see me is because maybe they're tired of dieting and now they want to take an approach that is a little bit more, I don't want to use the word intuitive, but is a little bit less rigid and allows them to really tap in to their body's own cues.
Yeah, I think I figured this out myself without somebody like you, in that I cycle through my own personal goals. I've physically acted my whole life. And then eventually I began to get a better, healthier, I think, perspective of food. And so I think I stumbled in backwards on this, and now it is a lot. Yeah, it affects my mental health because I'm constantly struggling with rules and diets and plans, and then not executing those versus really letting my body tell me where I'm at with what's working for me. So hopefully I framed that up and just gave reference to my own personal connection. But
yeah.
so
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Kaitlyn.
I was just going to say that, I think now more than ever, athletes have this pressure to be perfect in all aspects or areas of their life. And so, like you had mentioned, all of the rules, all of the diets, all of the things that we have to do so perfectly, or we're told that we have to do so perfectly in order to be a good athlete in our sport or to excel performance wise. I think, intuitive eating really lets down some of that pressure or removes some of that perfectionism, or at least lets us take a step back and really revisit and or just connect with the way that we're feeling and connect with the world.
Wow, we touched on a lot today. We sort of gave a broad overview, and Kaitlyn, we're going to have you on where we maybe take one of these and do a little bit deeper dive later on this year, which I love talking about all this. So as we end this, Kaitlyn, where can our audience connect with you and learn more about your work and services?
Yeah, so I am on Instagram. My handle is Kaitlyn Pscodna _RDN. And then individuals can also look me up via my website, which is Kaitlyn Pscodna RDN.
We'll have that in the show notes. And hey, that's it for today's episode of the Eat to Win podcast show. A huge thank you to Kaitlyn Pscodna for sharing her expertise on intuitive eating and Red S and eating disorders and athletes. And look, if you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and share with your community. Until next time,
Thanks for joining us on the Eat to Win show. Remember, every meal is a step toward victory. Until next time, stay strong and keep winning.